foot-tall beehives, fainting Elvis fans, communist paranoia, and the bomb. The years after World War II were filled with excitement as the economy exploded, politicians regrouped, and society changed dramatically. President Harry Truman proclaimed, "We want peace and prosperity for the world as a whole. If we can put this tremendous machine of ours, which has made this victory possible, to work for peace, we can look forward to the greatest age in the history of mankind." In the decades following the end of the Second World War, the great age that President Harry Truman had wished for came true to millions of Americans. The United States entered a period of unprecedented economic growth and prosperity that for the first time in history boosted a majority of American families into the middle class and made their American dream a reality. Tired of years of wartime shortages, Americans spent their money on the new consumer goods that poured out of American factories. Cars were especially hot items. Sometimes people paid more than dealers were asking, just so they could get one quickly. The federal government also helped the surging economy. Defense contracts poured billions of dollars into U.S. businesses. Continued government funding for research stimulated innovations in the electronics and aerospace industries and in scientific research. The United States was once again the land of opportunity, as newly trained scientists, business leaders, and workers turned their attention to producing new inventions, televisions, radios, and gadgets of all kinds. As sales soared, American corporations grew bigger and more profitable than ever before. And corporate leaders like Henry Ford II and RCA's David Sarnoff became national heroes. New technologies were also enabling factories to produce more goods with fewer workers. America's booming mass consumer economy was also changing the very nature of work.
What must be grasped is the picture of society as a great salesroom, an enormous file, an incorporated brain, a new universe of management and manipulation. C. Wright Mills, sociologist.
More and more people worked in offices or provided services as members of the country's exploding white-collar workforce.
The old middle class, which was your professional classes, your managerial classes, is now expanding downward to include the people who made the washing machines and the dryers, the cars, the Jeeps, and the airplanes, and so on. So that people who before the war would have been considered working class factory workers become members of the middle class.
Farmers also prospered as new machines, chemical fertilizers, and pesticides revolutionized American agriculture. In 1910, one farmer could feed 8 people a year. By 1950, one farmer fed 15. Foreign tourists marveled at the fruit, vegetables, and packaged goods that overflowed supermarket shelves. Even dog food came in several varieties and flavors.
It's interesting how we invent labels to describe one era or another. And sometimes we call the period after 1945, after the end of World War II, the affluent era. But that hides the other side of America that remained mired in poverty, in substandard housing, who couldn't achieve the American dream.
Not everyone participated in the prosperity of the post-war era. Many American women who had worked during the war were sent home to make room for returning GIs. African Americans and other minorities found that racial discrimination let them climb only so far up the economic ladder of opportunity. Many Americans still lived in poverty. These were real problems. and President Harry Truman figured he had the solution. When the war first ended, President Harry Truman faced the problem of reconverting the economy to peacetime production. Many people feared that the war's end might bring back the Great Depression. To ease returning veterans back into the workforce, Congress passed the GI Bill, which offered a low-cost education and low-interest loans to buy homes and start businesses.
The GI Bill funded the construction of hundreds of thousands of small tract houses, which were not only affordable, but were made even more affordable by virtue of a loan program which eliminated the down payment, so that for $100 you were given the key to a new home, and the government insured the mortgage.
Millions of veterans used their GI benefits to get good educations, buy a home, and enter the white-collar workforce. Easier access to higher education changed the face of the nation's colleges and universities and created the new perception that a college education was for everyone, not just the wealthy or super intellectual. Building on Roosevelt's New Deal, President Truman wanted the federal government to help provide what he called a fair deal for the American people. Truman pushed for a higher minimum wage, extended Social Security benefits to 10 million new workers, and fought for public housing and other programs to help the poor. The years following World War II also witnessed a series of breakthroughs for African Americans, as Jackie Robinson broke the color line in Major League Baseball in 1947, and Ralph Bunche won the Nobel Peace Prize in 1950. Feeling a special moral obligation to African Americans for their patriotism in World War II, President Truman set up a Presidential Committee on Civil Rights, which soon called for laws to end lynching and segregation.
Our immediate task is to remove the last remnants of the barriers which stand between millions of our citizens and their birthright. There is no justifiable reason for discrimination because of ancestry or religion or race or color.
In 1948, Truman issued an executive order to end segregation in the United States Armed Forces. Truman's fair deal ran up against stiff opposition. Angered at the president's support of black civil rights, Southern Democrats, called Dixiecrats, left the Democratic Party in the presidential election of 1948 and set up their States' Rights, or Dixiecrat, Party. Republicans demanded a quick end to the Democrats' New Deal and Fair Deal programs. And with the return of prosperity, growing numbers of white Americans agreed. But in the presidential election of 1948, Truman surprised his critics and the pollsters by winning one of the closest elections in American history.
The president rode back into office on the basis of returns from Ohio, a state that Dewey had won 4 years before. It was 11 o'clock the next morning before Dewey conceded, and later the president attended a victory dinner.